I always bring John McMullen up, too, at 4 o'clock right here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. It's time for football at 4 as the Eagles with a, would you say, a season-saving victory yesterday, John McMullen?
No, I don't think it was season-saving, only because I think the NFC East is so bad that even if they lost the game, they still would have been in it if you project forward and look at the last 5 games of the schedule. But emotionally, after what happened last week, I think it was important to come out and win that football game. And if they didn't, and if they were blown out, which I could never foresee because Buffalo is just so hamstrung by the quarterback offensively. But if it went in a terrible direction, whether it was defensive touchdowns, special teams touchdowns, I think the train could have derailed at that point. So I think it was very important, but the lack of good teams in the NFC East is hard to say it was season-saving.
All right, well, that being said, was it an impressive victory? I mean, would you say it was dominant, impressive? I mean, how would you then characterize what we saw yesterday?
Yeah, I think it was dominant. I think, it's kind of weird to look at a 5-1 team and say they weren't very good, but the Bills aren't very good. They're better than they were, but everybody knew that was kind of a mirage. If you look at their schedule, they happen to have a light part of the schedule early, and they took advantage of it, and they deserve credit for that. It's a good defense, but that offense, man, I mean, what can you do?
Yeah.
As good as Frank Gore is, even he, and he's been doing it for so long, he's a grinder. He's going to get 4 or 5 yards, and he's going to get you that way. It's not explosive. There's just no explosion on that offense.
Yeah, well, that goes to then, I mean, I don't know what we learned about the Eagles' defense. They had a good day in terms of the secondary didn't get beat. They played pretty well, but is that more the Eagles, okay, we told you once we got Mills and Darby back that we'd be all good, or is that because the Bills just aren't good?
Well, that's kind of what I put on Twitter, a little from column A, a little from column B. Look, there's no question. Ronald Darby, Jalen Mills are significantly better than Rasul Douglas and Sidney Jones. And I know people don't want to admit that. They don't like those two players. For whatever reasons, they're significantly better football players at this stage. And so that's part of it. This is a better defense when they're on the field. Ronald looks a little healthier, looks more confident. They're not great. I'm not trying to say that by any stretch of the imagination. They're just better than what you were trotting out there, and that gives everybody, I think, a little bit more confidence. So I think the defense is better, but there will be tougher tests. The good news for the Eagles is they will not be facing one of those tougher tests this Sunday, another bad quarterback. So it's a nice little, stretch in the schedule for them to gain some confidence on the defensive side of the football.
John, what are your thoughts on how Doug called the game? I mean, we're going to continue to bring up the weather when we're talking about this game because, once again, I don't know how to assess the offense and Doug with the weather. And I'm not being negative. I'm just being honest and open-minded with everything because he goes the 2 running backs at times. That's what sprung Miles Sanders for the touchdown everyone's talking about. And also a little bit more of Boston Scott. So how do you think Doug, implemented him and just the offense in general from start to finish?
Well, I don't know. I mean, Boston Scott had more to do with Miles leaving with a shoulder injury. He gave Jeff Stoutland the credit for the lead ISO play in the chat, putting that in. So you have to give Stout credit, and you have to give Doug credit for passing the baton and saying that was a Jeff Stoutland play, a Jeff Stoutland design. And you don't see lead ISO. So I think the Bills were surprised by that. Also, Isaac Seumalo had a great down block on that particular play. So, I say this a lot, but when people talk, I think the Eagles were more creative, but I think it was forced creativity because of the weather. I don't know if they're going to continue to run the ball like that. In fact, I know they're not going to continue to run the ball like that when they get into normal environments, so I wouldn't get overhyped about that. And I often talk about, when people talk about play calling, they're not really talking about creativity or play designs. They're talking about results. And a lot of times you might call a good play, and it doesn't work for various reasons, whether somebody breaks down, somebody misses a block, or sometimes you call a bad play, and it ends up working because whatever, Carson Wentz extends the play. I thought it was fine, but I don't think the game planning has been the issue with the Eagles this year. I think it's been the talent, especially at wide receiver, after Deshaun Jackson went down.
You mentioned Carson extending plays, and he did it a couple times late in the game on two separate third downs. I think one was 3rd and 5, one might have been 3rd and 10, using his legs. And we talked about this earlier. You don't really see that as much from him, but with the offense in question, as much as we do question it, what are your thoughts on Carson using his legs a little bit? And is that something that you would like to see more safely and when the opportunity presents itself?
Yeah, no question. I think that's been missing from his game since the ACL injury. Forget the back injury. So you got to go way back to December of 2017. I mean, now that he's feeling more comfortable, I mean, that's a big strength of his game. You see it all. You saw, if you watched this Sunday night game, you saw Aaron Rodgers do it, and he's been doing it for years. But even at his age, he's still a great athlete. And if you see the opposing defense playing man-to-man coverage and they turn their backs, if you're Carson Wentz, you should take advantage of that. And I think it's good to see him getting back to that. I think some of it was desperation. He felt that was a must-win game. Hopefully it continues, because I constantly say all the time as well, you can't legislate injuries. He's cleared. He's ready to go. He's well over a year from the torn ACL. He should be completely over that. As I mentioned, he's clear from the back injury, no issues there. If somebody gives you that, you got to take it. That's one of the strengths of his game.
John McMullen, Football at 4 at JF McMullen. You wrote that Peterson put down his winning card yesterday. What exactly was that? Because, he was asked after the game about was the game plan mainly because of the weather. And he kind of said, yeah, I don't know that we would have done the same stuff with the weather.
Yeah, no. I mean, there's no question. Anytime you have 40-mile-an-hour gusts, you have to rethink things, and you can't do what you normally want to do. And, people love running the football in Philadelphia, and it stems from a different era of football. And when you see it succeed to such a degree, I think people get excited. But you got to be realistic. You can't do that every week in this league. And you certainly can't do it when you get behind by double digits, which the Eagles have done so many times this season. You certainly can't do it if you're playing an explosive team, say Kansas City with Patrick Mahomes when he gets back. I mean, they're just going to go up and down the field. So you have to be realistic about the modern NFL. I thought the Eagles went into a weather game in a tough situation and put together a good plan. And I think they deserve credit for it. But I don't know if it can carry over. In fact, I do know it can't carry over. Got to do different things starting this Sunday in Lincoln Financial Field.
Yeah, and there's so much. I mean, I thought that fourth quarter drive was just something that we don't see all that much from them, where you just run that clock out. And they did it because they ran the ball and were able to, basically do it. Well, is that because they did a great job? Was Buffalo kind of wearing out? Is Buffalo's defense not as good? Because that should give people confidence that they can, run the clock out. They can, run a game out like that. That's something that you want to take from that game, but can you?
Well, you can. I mean, you can take from that game when you have a lead in the fourth quarter.
Right, like you look at that saying the Eagles are a good running team, and can run the game out, and that was proven on Sunday, or do you put other factors that kind of, well, you know what I mean?
No, I think the recipe is there. If they have a lead in the fourth quarter, I think they can run the game out because they have that type of running back now, and they finally acknowledged that Jordan Howard is the best runner on this team. So it took them too late to get there, but they got there.
Mm-hmm.
And he's also a running back that is the classic old school, gets stronger as the game goes on. And everybody says the same thing about Jordan Howard. He's always going forward, even when you stop him. I remember talking to Mike Zimmer before the Minnesota game, and he said you hit him at 2 yards, and all of a sudden he's falling forward for 5 yards. That's the type of running back he is, and he wears on opposing defenses. And I think you saw that, and that's what happens. You see it in around the NFL. Teams wear down, and it's part physically and also part mentally. And they stole the Bills' soul with that drive. And they were just beating them off the ball. And, yeah, I think that's a recipe, but it's a recipe. You got to get the lead in the fourth quarter. You got to be winning in the fourth quarter to do it. So that's the more difficult part.
John, a lot will be moving forward based on the fact that they won the game. And now what? Some reports out there that they're going to do something fun. Yesterday, Chris Mortensen said that game – something fun. What does that even mean? That game is key to how active the Eagles will be. At least people around the league believe this, that if they would have won the game, watch for the result of the game, that will measure the Eagles' aggressiveness. So do you think it's game on now for Howie Roseman?
Yeah, I already got Jannard Avery. What more do you want?
Yeah, give us a little insight there. What is that all about?
Well, it's situational pass rusher. It's sort of a tweener. Was a line. Kind of weird player for the Eagles because he's more of a 3-4 guy if you look at his body. But the Eagles liked him coming out of the 2018 draft and thought he had a chance to be a decent situational pass rusher. So this is only a second year. Had a really good rookie season when Greg Williams was in Cleveland, but the defensive coaching changed. They went to Steve Wilkes. He basically hasn't played. So they got him on the second year of his rookie deal. I don't necessarily think this is about now. This is about getting somebody they liked in the building and see if they can work with him and see if he can develop into the situational pass rusher they thought he might be coming out of college. So I think it's more to do with that than this guy's coming in to be a significant contributor.
John, after the game yesterday, it's for a lot of fans and listeners out there, it's tough to really analyze and feel comfortable with what we have with the Philadelphia Eagles. So after that game, what do you see that's still a concern? Because it is a blowout win and it's against a good team on the road after the past two losses. So it's like you want to feel really good about it, but then we have these weather factors and other things that I think are giving a lot of people some hesitation. So help us get a better understanding of everything and what's something that's still an issue to you.
Well, the biggest issue is wide receiver, and Deshaun Jackson will start practicing at least somewhat this week. They need him back. They need him on the field. Matt Collins is officially 0 for October. We're not going to play again till the Eagles aren't going to play again till November. He did not catch a pass in the entire month of October. So they're getting no production from that spot in the offense. And you saw Deshaun Jackson week one. I think that's been the biggest issue with this offense as a whole. Other parts, I think, are getting better. I mentioned the corners. Those corners are significantly better. As I said, they're getting them back. When they get Avonte Maddox back, he'll be back at practice this week. All of a sudden, hopefully, you get a little better in the slot as well. Cre'Von LeBlanc is around the corner. He'll be back at some point. So that will help in the slot as well. Tim Jernigan is getting closer. That'll help at defensive tackle. But, Doug said today and he said last week, look, if they're going to make a trade and Doug has any say in it, it's going to be at defensive tackle. So I think, People have been talking about cornerback for weeks. They've settled that down. They've already settled it down. If you haven't noticed, they have with the return of Mills and Darby. And it's only going to get better. Deshaun, that's the big question mark. If he's not able to go, and by not able to go, I'm talking about being himself, not necessarily being on the field, that's their biggest need by far. If he's able to be himself, it's not even a need. It's so hard to gauge. Mm-hmm. So it's difficult to kind of decide what to do. And there's no question, even with Tim Jernigan back, they need another body at defensive tackle. So if there's one position you look at and say, what's the most obvious need? It's defensive tackle, and the head coach has already said it twice.
Yeah. Well, let's get a quick update on what, Deshaun Jackson, Avonte Maddox, Darren Sproles, Bradham. It's even Jason Peters. And Jernigan. It sounds like almost everybody's going to be back on Wednesday.
No, Jason's the only one who's not.
Okay, Jason probably
he's
not.
More
Sorry.
Week to week. I don't know if Nigel, he called him day to day. I don't necessarily think he'll be back Wednesday. So he might be a little bit more. Deshaun will be back. Avonte already was back on Friday doing a little bit. So, yeah, I mean, they're getting healthier. And Doug has kind of said, these are kind of our trade pickups. If Deshaun gets back, if you already had Darby Mills back, you had Maddox and LeBlanc, Jernigan. These are sort of their trade pickups.
Yeah.
Along with what they're able to do.
Well, last year, John, they were 4-4. They went and got Tate. I mean, if they do something, is it in that mold?
Yeah, I mean, I think Howie's going to do something more. I do think he's going to try to do something. You saw Leonard Williams. I thought, there's a kind of guy, and I explained it on Twitter. Look, from a football standpoint, he can help. But you see what he got. He got a third-round pick and a fifth-round pick. Plus, he's on his final year of his deal. So you're going to have to pay him next year. And people don't realize Malik Jackson is back. You can't cut Malik Jackson because that would be over $14 million in dead cap. So Leonard Williams was never realistic, and people snicker at guys they don't heard of, guys they haven't heard of like Jannard Avery, but he's on the second year of his rookie deal. He's cost effective. Sometimes you have to look at the back end. And when you have high-priced players, you can't go out and get another high-priced player. It's just not how the salary cap works.
All right, at JF McMullen, the countdown to kickoff tonight. It's live at the Landmark Americana, and the crew will be out there. Tony Bruno, you'll hear from John McMullen. They'll get a little further on this game and all the Week 8 stuff as well. You had a Cowboy bye, a Redskin bye. You had a Giant loss inside the division. You had a 49er win, 7-0. You buying them?
I certainly am defensively, no question. I mean, that front seven is legit. I don't know if they're going to be able to hold up offensively, but they've been winning games and two of their offensive linemen have been hurt. That tells you how good that defense is.
You got 7-0, 7-1, 7-1, Green Bay and the Saints, 6-2 Seattle, 6-2 Minnesota. Right now, how are you ranking your NFC teams?
Boy, I'm starting to think it's Green Bay's year. It's funny because the Eagles are the only team that beat them, but everything is going their way. They have to go to Kansas City, and Patrick Mahomes isn't there. And I don't know if you saw that one throw by Aaron Rodgers yesterday, but it was an all-timer.
Yeah, I kept checking back and forth between that and those two models behind home plate last night.
Yeah, well, that was better. You made the right decision. Even as beautiful as that throw was, it wasn't that beautiful.
No, not even close.
But as far as, if you go back to that Detroit game where every single call, the Lions were so upset, went against them, and Green Bay probably won a game it shouldn't have won. If you go back to Kirk Cousins throwing that awful interception when Minnesota was going in to win the game. If you go back to week 1 in Chicago, the Bears defense just dominated, and Mitchell Trubisky was Trubiskying things up. They've everything has fallen the Packers' way. So I'm starting to think they might be that team of destiny.
All right. That's 8 games. We're 8 weeks through right now. We got one game tonight. It's maybe the worst Monday Night Football game in the history of Monday Night Football. And that's hard to say because there have been some bad ones, but it's 0-6 Miami taking on a 2-4 Steelers outfit who's on to their third quarterback. Although I think they're back to their second.
Mason Rudolph.
Yeah, Rudolph is back now. So, by the way, Pittsburgh about a 2-touchdown favorite tonight. And there you go. That's all.
You're a 2-touchdown favorite with Mason Rudolph coming off a concussion. What does that say about the Miami Dolphins?
Terrible. All right, John, we will catch up for more football at 4 tomorrow.
All right, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, man. And John McMullen, like all guests, appear via the Boardwalk Honda Hotline.